Okay, so this is the Daf Yomi. We're in Avodah, Daf 46. So Rabbi Akiva said to him, but isn't it already stated, you shall destroy, Deuteronomy 12:2? This obviously includes rooting out all traces of idols. If so, what is the meaning of the verse when the verse states, quote, and you shall destroy their name out of that place? This means that it is a mitzvah to give it a nickname. One might have thought that one may give it a positive nickname. The Gemara interjects. Would it enter your mind that one may say give a positive nickname to an idol? Rather, the Braita means that one might have thought that the reference is to a nickname that is neither positive nor negative. Therefore, the verse states, and you shall not bring an abomination into your house and be accursed like it. You shall detest it, and you shall abhor it, for it is a prescribed item. Deuteronomy 7:26. So this verse clearly indicates that the nickname should be a negative one. How so? To what type of nickname is this referring? If the idol worshippers would call their house of worship the house of elevation, Beit Galia, one should call it the house of digging, Beit Karya. If they call it the all-seeing eye, Ein Kol, one should call it the eye of a thorn, Ein Kotz. The Tana who recited Mishnayot and Braitot in the study hall taught a Braita before Rav Sheshet with regard to the halacha in the case of the Gentiles who worship the mountains and the hills. The mountains and hills are permitted, but their worshippers are punished with decapitation by the sword. But with regard to Gentiles who worship plants and vegetables, the plants and vegetables are forbidden, and their worshippers are punished with decapitation by the sword. Rav Sheshet said to him, who is the Tana who said this to you? It must be Rabbi Yoshi, son of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that a tree that one planted and subsequently worshipped is forbidden. The Gemara asked, but why not interpret the Braita as referring to a tree that one initially planted for idol worship, and then the ruling would be consistent with the opinion of the rabbis as well? The Gemara answers, this should not enter your mind, as the Braita teaches the case of plants and vegetables as being similar to the case of a mountain. Therefore, one can extrapolate that just as with regard to a mountain, it is a case where one did not initially plant it for this purpose, as mountains are not planted by people, so too this case of plants and vegetables is a case where one did not initially plant it for this purpose. It is stated, the halakha in a case where a Gentile worships boulders that naturally became dislodged from a mountain. It is subject to dispute between the sons of Rabbi Chia on the one hand and Rabbi Yochanan on the other. One side says they are forbidden and one side says they are permitted. The Gemara asks, what is the reason of the one who says that they are permitted? The Gemara answers, the status of the dislodged stones is still like the status of the mountain itself. Just as in the case of a mountain, it is not the product of human involvement, and therefore it is permitted to derive benefit from it, even after it is worshipped, so too these boulders, which are not the product of human involvement, are permitted. So the Gemara raised an objection, what is notable about a mountain? It is notable in that it is attached to the ground, and this may be the reason for the leniency concerning it. And this does not apply to boulders. The Gemara responds, the case of a worshipped animal can prove that this is not relevant, as it is permitted to derive benefit from a worshipped animal, even though it is not attached to the ground. The Gemara defends its objection. What is notable about an animal? It is notable in that it is a living, animate being. This may be the reason for the leniency concerning it, and this does not apply to boulders. The Gemara responds, the case of a mountain can prove that this is not relevant, as it is permitted to derive benefit from a mountain that was worshipped, even though it is not a living being. And the inference has reverted to its starting point, and the halakha can be inferred from a combination of the two sources. The aspect of this case, that of a mountain, is not like the aspect of that case, that of an animal. And the aspect of that case is not like the aspect of this case. So the common element is that they are not products of human involvement, and it is permitted to derive benefit from them. So too, in any case of worshipped objects that are not the product of human involvement, including boulders, they are permitted. The Gemara objects, what is notable about the common element between the case of a mountain and that of an animal that prevents utilizing it as a paradigm for other cases? These worshipped objects are notable in that they were not altered from their natural form. Perhaps that is why their status remains unchanged. By contrast, a dislodged boulder has been moved from its original position. So rather, the halakha that a boulder that is dislodged from a mountain is still permitted after it is worshipped is derived from the case of a blemished animal and from the case of a mountain, both of which are permitted after having been worshipped. The notable aspect of a mountain in that it is an unaltered object and it is attached to the ground, is centered by the case of a blemished animal, and the notable aspect of a blemished animal is that it is a living being countered by the case of a mountain. Therefore, it can be derived from the common element of the two cases that just as these two are not products of human involvement and are not rendered forbidden by worship, so too a dislodged boulder is not rendered forbidden by worship. Alternatively, the halakha can be derived from the case of an unblemished animal from the case of a withered tree, both of which are permitted after having been worshipped. The notable aspect of an unblemished animal is that it is unaltered in a living being, is countered by the case of a withered tree, and the notable aspect of a withered tree, in that it is attached to the ground, is countered by the case of an unblemished animal. The Gemara asks, and what is the reasoning of the one who deems worship boulders forbidden? The Gemara answers, according to that opinion, it is, in order to teach this halakha, it is written, and you shall not bring an abomination into your house and be accursed like it. You shall detest it and you shall abhor it, for it is a prescribed item. Deuteronomy 7:26. This verse teaches that although one may theoretically derive by logical inference to permit the boulders, do not derive that halakha. The Gemara introduced the case of a boulder that naturally dislodged from a mountain as a subject of a dispute between the sons of Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yochanan, but it did not specify who subscribes to which opinion. So the Gemara suggests it may be concluded that it is the sons of Rabbi Chia who deem it permitted, as Chizkiah, Rabbi Chia's son, raises a dilemma. If one erected an egg in order to bow to it as an idol, what is the halakha? Is it then prohibited to derive benefit from the egg? The Gemara explains the proof. It enters your mind that this dilemma is referring to a case where one erected an egg in order to bow to it and then bowed to it, and he raises a dilemma as to whether this erecting of the egg is considered a significant act of human involvement that renders the egg forbidden as an object of idol worship, or whether it is not considered a significant act of human involvement. But if he had not erected the egg, there would be no dilemma, as clearly it would not become forbidden. Accordingly, one can conclude from this dilemma that the sons of Rabbi Chia are the ones who deem the boulder permitted, since it is not a product of human involvement. The Gemara rejects this proof. No, actually, I will say to you that perhaps it is the sons of Rabbi Chia who deemed the dislodged boulder forbidden after it was worshipped, and they similarly hold that in this case of the egg, if he bowed to it, even if he did not erect it, the egg is certainly forbidden. And the dilemma is as follows. Here we are dealing with a case where he erected the egg in order to bow to it, but he ultimately did not bow to it. Hizkiah's dilemma was whether designation of an egg as an idol renders it forbidden even without actual worship. The Gemara asks, but according to whom does he raise the dilemma? If it is according to the one who says that any object of a Jew who dedicated it to idol worship is immediately rendered forbidden, there is no place for the dilemma. The egg is clearly forbidden. If it is according to the one who says that an object of idol worship is not forbidden until it is actually worshipped, there is also no place for the dilemma, as the egg was not worshipped and is therefore permitted. The Gemara answers by reformulating the case. No, those are not the case with regard to which the dilemma is raised. It is necessary to raise it with regard to a case where one erected an egg, in order to bow to it, but ultimately he did not bow to it. And then a Gentile came along and bowed to it. It is with regard to this case that Chizkiah raises the dilemma. There is an established principle that one cannot render forbidden an item that is not his. In this case, the egg can be rendered forbidden only by a combination of the Jew's owner's indicated intention and the Gentile's act of worship. So this dilemma assumes that, which Rav Yehuda says, that Shmuel says, in the case of a Jew who erected a brick in order to bow to it, and a Gentile came and bowed to it, it is forbidden. And Chizkiah raises the following dilemma with regard to the case of an egg. Is it specifically a brick that is forbidden, as it's being erected is clearly recognizable and is therefore a clear indication of the intent on behalf of the Jewish owner? But as for an egg, erecting it is not enough of an indication and it is therefore permitted? Or perhaps there is no difference and the egg should similarly be forbidden? Gemara concludes, the question shall stand unresolved. So, Rami Bar Chama raises a dilemma. In the case of one who bows down to a mountain, what is the halacha with regard to the permissibility of using its stones for building the altar in the temple? The Gemara explains the dilemma. An animal that was worshipped is rendered unfit to be sacrificed as an offering in the temple. The Gemara previously established a principle that objects attached to the ground are not rendered forbidden by idol worship. The question here is this. With regard to an item that is attached to the ground and that was worshipped, is it rendered unfit for the Most High, that is for the temple, just like an animal? Or is the halacha that with regard to an item that is attached to the ground and that was worshipped, it is not rendered unfit for the Most High, just as it is not forbidden with regard to an individual's deriving benefit from it. Furthermore, if you say that with regard to an item that is attached to the ground and that was worshipped, it is rendered unfit for the Most High, are the items that merely facilitate the sacrifice of an offering, such as the altar, viewed the same as an offering itself or not? As an offering itself or not? Perhaps the principle that items worshipped in idolatrous practice are disqualified for use in the temple applies only to offerings and not to the items used to facilitate the bringing of the offerings. So Rava says the dilemma can be resolved with an a fortiori inference. Kal v'chomer. Let's see. The Torah prohibits the sacrifice of an animal as an offering or a donation to the temple if it was given in payment to a prostitute or exchanged in the sale of a dog. And if it is so that concerning deriving benefit from an item that served as payment to a prostitute, which is permitted to an ordinary person, even in a case where the item is detached from the ground, nevertheless, such an item is forbidden to use for the Most High, even in a case where it is attached to the ground. As it is written, you shall not bring in the payment to a prostitute or the price of a dog into the house of the Lord your God for any vow. Deuteronomy 23:19. Where there is no difference whether the payment is attached to the ground or there is no difference whether it is attached, so unattached or attached, concerning an object worshipped in idolatrous practice, which is rendered forbidden in a case where it is detached, even for the use of an ordinary person, is it not logical that it should be prohibited to use it for the Most High, even in a case of an object attached to the ground? So Rav Huna, son of Rav Yehoshua, said to Rava, or one can reverse the claim. And if an object that was worshipped, which is forbidden in a case where it is detached from the ground, even for the use of an ordinary person, is yet permitted for use, even for the Most High, in a case where it is attached to the ground, as it is stated that the mitzvah is to destroy, quote, their gods upon the high mountains, Deuteronomy 12:2, but not the mountains themselves that are their gods, and therefore with regard to such things there is no difference between use for an ordinary person and for the Most High. Concerning payment to a prostitute, which is permitted for use for an ordinary person in the case of a detached item, is it not logical that it should be permitted for use for the Most High in a case where the payment is an item attached to the ground? So Rav Huna, son of Rav Yehoshua, continues, if one would say that it should still be prohibited to use it in the temple due to that which the verse states, you shall not bring the payment to a prostitute or the price of a dog into the house of the Lord your God, which indicates a blanket prohibition. This verse is already necessary to teach another halacha, namely that which is taught in a Braita. The phrase, quote, into the house of the Lord your God, excludes its use as a red heifer, which is not brought to the temple. Rather, it is sacrificed outside the city on the Mount of Olives. And this is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer, and the rabbis say it is stated to include the prohibition against hanging in the temple beaten plates of gold that were used in the payment of a prostitute. Even though they are not used in the temple service, it is prohibited to hang them up. So Rava said to Rav Huna, son of Rav Yehoshua, I am starting an a fortiori inference, so kal v'chomer, right? Inference that leads to a stringency, and you are stating an opposite a fortiori inference that leads to a leniency. So in the principle is that wherever there is the opinion to employ an a fortiori inference that leads to a leniency or one that leads to a stringency, we infer the stringency. Okay, so Rav Papa said to Rava, and is it so that anywhere that there is an option to employ an a fortiori inference to infer a leniency or a stringency, we do not infer the leniency? But isn't there the case of a sprinkling the pure water of red heifer upon one who was contracted ritual impurity through the contact of a corpse, in order to thereby obligate him in the sacrifice and eating the paschal offering? As Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva disagree with regard to whether it is permitted to do this on Shabbat, each of them employed an a fortiori inference to support his opinion. As Rabbi Eliezer holds that a stringency should be inferred, and he thereby deems the man obligated to purify himself and bring a paschal offering, even if he can purify himself only on Shabbat. And Rabbi Akiva infers a leniency and exempts him from the obligation to bring the offering. And clearly, contrary to Rava's claim, Rabbi Akiva infers a leniency. This is, as we learned in a Mishnah, Pesachim 56, B. That Rabbi Eliezer reasoned, if slaughter, which is generally prohibited on Shabbat by Torah law, is permitted for the sake of sacrifice in the Paschal offering, all the more so is it not clear that sprinkling the purifying water of a red heifer, which is prohibited on Shabbat, merely due to a rabbinic decree, should override Shabbat? So Rabbi Akiva replied, or one can reverse the claim, and if sprinkling the purifying water on Shabbat, which is prohibited merely due to the rabbinic decree, does not override Shabbat, then with regard to slaughter, which is prohibited by Torah law, all the more so is it not clear that it should not override Shabbat. Contrary to Rabba's claim, Rabbi Akiva clearly infers a leniency instead of a stringency inferred by Rabbi Eliezer. The Gemara answers there, Rabbi Akiva does not employ a real a fortiori inference. So Rabbi Eliezer himself taught him this halacha, which he knew as a tradition, but he had forgotten his own learning, and Rabbi Akiva came to remind him of it by drawing an a fortiori inference that would cause Rabbi Eliezer to remember that which he himself had taught. The Gemara offers a support for this interpretation from the continuation of that discussion, which is recorded in a Braita. And this is what Rabbi Akiva said to him, my teacher, do not deny my contention at the time of judgment, that is, during deliberation of this matter, as this is the tradition I received from you. Sprinkling is prohibited by rabbinic decree and does not override Shabbat. So Rami Bar Chama raises a dilemma. In the case of one who bows to a stalk of wheat, which is the halacha with regard to using it for a meal offering? So does the wheat lose its forbidden status after it is ground into flour or not? Does a change in the form of a worshipped object revoke its forbidden status, or does a change in the form of a worshipped object not revoke its forbidden status? Mar Zutra, son of Rav Nachman, said, come and hear, Tashema, come and hear a resolution from that which is taught in the Mishnah, Teruma 30b. The principle is that concerning all items that are forbidden with regard to sacrificing them on the altar, their offspring, that is, whatever products are derived from them, are permitted. And it is taught with regard to this Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer deems the offspring forbidden. The Gemara asks, but wasn't it stated with regard to this dispute that Rav Nachman says that Rabbi Bar Avu says the dispute is with regard to a case where it became prohibited to use the animals as offerings because a person engaged in bestiality with them and later they became pregnant. So that is the end of Daf 46. Thanks for watching.